Billionaire's deaf twins never smiled, until the nanny danced in late wife's dress. Stay with me till the very end, and let me know where you're watching from, so I can see how far the truth really spreads. Some wounds never heal on their own. For Alexander Carter, 4 years of silence had turned his home into a tomb. His twin boys, born deaf, had never once laughed in his arms. And then came Elena, a young woman with nothing but courage in her heart. One night, she slipped on a dress once worn by the wife he lost, pressed play on a song that had belonged to her soul, and began to dance. The boys giggled for the first time in their lives, their small hands reaching toward her. Alexander stood frozen in the doorway, torn between grief and hope, not knowing if this moment would save him or destroy him. Alexander Carter was a man people respected, but inside his home, he moved like a shadow. At 40, he carried the weight of a wife he had lost and children he could not reach. His words were clipped, his eyes heavy, as if every glance carried the reminder that Isabella had given her last breath the day Liam and Lucas took their first. The twins were 4, born into silence. Deaf from the start, they had never known their mother's lullabies, and their father's distance only deepened the void. They clung to each other, restless but withdrawn, their hands busy with toys they never shared. To Alexander, they were both his only reason to keep going and the sharpest edge of his grief. He stood often in the doorway, watching them sit side by side on the floor, swaying in rhythm only they understood. He wanted to kneel beside them, to break the wall between them, but fear froze him in place. To his sons, he was a figure who drifted past, present but unreachable. Then Elena Brooks entered the house. 28, with no fortune, no reputation, but a steadiness born from her own struggles. The first time Alexander looked at her, he felt an unfamiliar jolt. Her steps carried warmth, her eyes sought connection, and for a moment he realized she did not belong to the world of shadows he had created. It unsettled him, because she seemed alive in a place where he had forgotten how to live. Elena spent her first days trying everything she could think of to reach the twins. She placed toys in their hands, rolled a ball across the carpet, even opened books with bright pictures, but Liam and Lucas gave her nothing. Their eyes slid away, their bodies stayed closed, as if she did not exist. She told herself to keep going, but each silent rejection pressed harder on her heart. She tried again the next day, kneeling to their level, smiling until her cheeks hurt. She tapped gently on their arms, waved her hands in greeting, even copied the way they rocked together, hoping to slip into their small world. But they never looked at her, clinging only to each other as if the rest of the world had nothing to offer. Her patience was tested, yet her belief in them held firm. From the hallway, Alexander stood in shadow. He told himself he was only passing by, yet he lingered, watching her efforts. He saw her laugh softly when the boys ignored her, saw her sigh when they turned their backs, and though he never stepped in, a part of him wanted to. His fists clenched, torn between stepping forward and retreating, but in the end he always turned away. Elena never knew he was there. To her, Alexander appeared only with orders and silence. But in those hidden moments, he carried both shame and a fragile spark of curiosity. He could not admit it, but he was waiting to see if she would stay longer than the others, and despite his fear, a small part of him hoped she might. Elena found the dress by accident, folded deep in the back of the wardrobe. She lifted it out with care, her fingers brushing against the faded fabric. That evening, she stood before the mirror, the dress draped across her arms. For a long moment she hesitated, whispering Isabella's name as if asking for permission. She saw her own reflection blur with the thought of the woman who had once worn it, and only then did she slip it over her shoulders. When she stepped into the room, Liam and Lucas noticed at once. Their eyes lingered, not on her face but on the familiar shape of the dress. For the first time, they stayed still. Elena took a shaky breath, pulled out the small speaker and let her finger hover over the button. She pressed play, and the first notes of Isabella's favorite soul song filled the silence. The boys froze, wide-eyed, their hands gripping the edge of the table. Elena swayed lightly, letting her body speak what words could not. Her steps were soft, almost playful, a gentle invitation. Liam tilted his head. Lucas blinked fast, both drawn to something they did not understand but could feel. Elena spun once, bent low, and smiled, her heart racing. Liam's lips trembled, then a giggle escaped, fragile but real. Elena clapped along, laughter breaking through her own fear. Lucas slid down from his chair, his knees wobbling, his feet stomping in time with the rhythm. He laughed too, sharp and bright, and the sound struck her like a miracle. She reached for his hands, guiding him side to side. Liam tugged at her skirt, refusing to be left out, and soon all three swayed together. Their laughter overlapped, clumsy and unsteady but alive. Elena's cheeks ached from smiling, her chest heavy with relief. After weeks of silence, the air was finally full of sound. At the doorway, Alexander stood frozen. He had come only to collect a file, but found himself staring at the impossible. His sons were laughing, moving, clinging to the hands of a woman wearing Isabella's dress, dancing to Isabella's song. His breath caught, his knees weak, as grief and hope collided inside him. Tears blurred his vision. He pressed a hand to his chest, trembling as he watched them. The sound of his children's laughter was both a wound and a gift, sharper than any memory he carried. For years, no doctor had broken the silence. Yet here, in one song, Elena had cracked it open. He could not look away. Alexander's chest heaved as he stepped fully into the room. His voice cracked into a roar, demanding why she dared to wear Isabella's dress. The boys shrank back, startled by the force in their father's tone. Elena froze, her hands trembling as she tried to steady herself, but her eyes never left his. He moved closer, his face twisted with grief and rage. His hand shot up halfway, fingers shaking, as if he might strike. For a long second the air froze, his breath ragged, his body trembling with the weight of memory. Then, with a choked growl, he let his arm fall, but his words cut even deeper. "Take it off. Now." Elena's lips parted, her voice trembling yet firm. She said she never meant to disrespect Isabella, only to give the boys a piece of the love they had lost. Her fingers fumbled at the hem, slowly slipping the fabric from her shoulders, her tears falling silently as she handed it back. She stood in her plain clothes, vulnerable but unbroken, whispering that joy was not betrayal. Alexander snatched the dress from her, clutching it against his chest like a shield. His knuckles whitened, his jaw locked, and for a moment he looked less like a father and more like a man drowning in grief. His eyes burned, not only with fury at her, but at himself for letting another soul touch what belonged to his wife. He turned away, shame chasing anger, his voice hoarse as he said the children needed doctors, not illusions. The silence that followed was suffocating. The twins huddled near Elena, their small hands clinging to her skirt, sensing the storm that had just passed. Elena drew them close, her voice steady despite her tears, telling him softly that hope was not reckless, it was survival. Alexander left the room, shoulders bent, the dress still clutched in his arms, unable to face what he had just revealed of himself. The next days passed in silence between Alexander and Elena. He avoided her, burying himself in his office, yet his eyes followed whenever she bent down to guide the boys. She never raised her voice, never forced them, only offered her hands and waited until they reached back. One afternoon, Liam wandered to the bookshelf and pulled down a photo frame. It was Isabella's smile, frozen in time. He stared, his lips moving without sound, then lifted his hands clumsily to shape a sign. Elena crouched beside him, whispering gently that it was Mama. Lucas joined, pressing close to his brother. His mouth opened, a sound escaped, broken but clear enough to echo the word Mama. Elena's eyes filled, her arms steadying both boys as they tried again, their little fingers shaping the sign, their voices trembling but real. The word carried both absence and presence, a bridge between memory and life. From the hallway, Alexander stood frozen. The sight pierced him. His chest ached as if the wound of Isabella's death had torn open again, yet at the same time something warm surged inside. His sons were reaching for a mother they had never known, and in their clumsy attempts he saw them stepping out of silence. He pressed a hand against the wall, his breath shallow. Part of him wanted to rush in, to hold them, but grief chained his feet. He watched Elena nod proudly, guiding their small hands, telling them softly that Mama loved them. The words shattered and healed him all at once. Alexander turned away, eyes burning, afraid of what would break if he let himself feel more. Yet the sound of his sons whispering Mama clung to him, stubborn and alive. For the first time in years, he felt that sorrow and hope could live in the same breath. Dr. Harris arrived with his usual calm presence, clipboard in hand, expecting a routine progress check. Alexander guided Liam and Lucas forward, his heart racing with the memory of them signing Mama. He whispered encouragement, but the boys froze under the stranger's gaze, their little bodies stiff, their eyes dropping to the floor. Elena knelt beside them, urging gently, but both children pressed into her arms, silent and withdrawn. The doctor observed, writing notes with careful detachment. Alexander's pride collapsed with every second that passed. His chest burned with humiliation, the fragile hope of the past weeks crumbling before his eyes. When Dr. Harris closed the file, his words were polite but final. What Alexander had described sounded like play, not proof. He cautioned against confusing moments of bonding with measurable progress. Alexander's jaw clenched as shame surged through him, hot and unrelenting. As soon as the doctor left, Alexander's fury erupted. He turned on Elena, accusing her of filling his sons with illusions, of making him believe in change that was never real. His voice was harsh, trembling with wounded pride, calling her reckless for giving him false hope. The words struck sharper than he intended, but he could not stop. Elena's face tightened, her eyes shining with hurt. Still, she stood steady, saying the boys needed faith more than charts, love more than reports. She reminded him that joy had kept them alive when silence had almost crushed them. Her voice was calm, but her heart was breaking. Alexander looked away, unable to face her conviction. His anger was only the mask of his despair, yet it left no room for gentleness. Elena gathered the twins close, her hand trembling as she soothed them. That night, she began to pack quietly, her mind heavy with the thought that maybe her place in this house was over. Elena's bag sat half open by the door the next evening. She had folded the boys' clothes neatly, pausing every few minutes when their small hands clung tighter to her sleeves. Liam's eyes were wide with confusion. Lucas pressed his face against her shoulder as if sensing her decision. She whispered that she was sorry, though they could not understand the words. Upstairs, Alexander paced restlessly. The memory of the doctor's verdict still echoed, but so did the sound of Elena's quiet defense. He told himself letting her leave was best, yet something inside him twisted at the thought. He had lost Isabella without a choice. Now he was about to lose this woman who had brought light back to his sons. The sound of music drifted faintly from downstairs. He froze, unsure if it was memory or real. Then came the laughter, thin but undeniable, Liam and Lucas stomping against the floorboards. They had found Elena's little speaker and pressed play. Their small hands waved clumsily, signing the one word they had learned with joy: dance, Papa. Alexander descended slowly, his chest tight. He saw them standing in the center of the room, their eyes locked on him, hands rising again in invitation. Elena stood nearby, her face streaked with tears, ready to walk away, yet the boys had chosen differently. Their plea cut through every wall he had built. For a moment he hesitated, shame weighing him down. Then Liam giggled. Lucas clapped, and the sound broke him open. Alexander stepped forward, his movements awkward, his voice unsteady as he whispered that Papa was here. He bent low, took their hands, and let himself be pulled into their rhythm. The twins laughed louder, circling him with clumsy steps. Elena covered her mouth, tears falling freely, watching as the man who had hidden behind grief finally gave in. Alexander's chest shook with sobs he could no longer hold. He pulled both boys into his arms and whispered over and over that he would never leave them again. Late that night, Alexander sat alone at his desk. His hands shook as he opened the drawer he had avoided for years. Inside lay a single envelope, yellowed at the edges, sealed but never sent. It was a letter he had written to Isabella in the weeks after her death, words he had never dared to show anyone. He carried it to Elena's room, his chest tight with hesitation. When she opened the door, she saw a man stripped of pride, holding something fragile between his fingers. Without explanation, he handed her the letter and stood silently as she unfolded the page. His eyes avoided hers, but his heart pounded with every line she read. The letter confessed his deepest fear. He had written that he did not know how to be a father without her, that he was terrified the boys would grow up broken, that he felt like a fraud pretending to be strong. He admitted he had thought of giving up, handing the children to someone else because he believed they deserved better than him. Eleanor's hands trembled as she folded the paper. Her eyes were full but steady when she finally looked at him. She said Isabella would never have judged him for his weakness, only for giving up, and he had not given up. He had stayed, endured, and kept their sons alive. That was why she would be proud. The words cracked something open inside Alexander. For the first time, he felt the weight lift slightly, as if he no longer carried it alone. Elena's gaze did not pity him. It held recognition, a quiet strength that reached the place he had kept hidden for years. He let out a shaky breath, realizing he was no longer as alone as he had believed. Elena tied colorful ribbons into loops and held them out for the boys. Liam's hands shook as he reached. Lucas clapped with nervous excitement. They stepped onto the grass, wobbling, gripping the ribbons like lifelines. Elena encouraged them, her voice steady, her smile never fading, even as their steps faltered. The twins stumbled, but kept moving, ribbons fluttering in the air. They laughed breathlessly, glancing back toward the house as if searching for someone. Their small fingers moved in a familiar shape. "Come, Papa." The sign was clumsy but full of longing. Alexander stood frozen at the doorway. The words struck him harder than any memory. He had watched from the shadows for too long, but now his sons were calling for him, not with words but with open hands. His chest broke open, tears flooding before he could stop them. He ran forward, faster than he thought his legs could carry him. The boys reached out, ribbons tangling as they stumbled into his arms. He fell to his knees, clutching them both, sobs tearing through him with a force years of silence had held back. For the first time, his children pressed their faces to his chest without fear. Elena stepped back, her eyes wet, watching as the wall around this family finally shattered. Alexander held his sons tighter, whispering through his tears that he was here, that he would never let them face the world alone. The boys laughed against his shoulders, their voices bright and unrestrained. In that moment, father and sons found each other again. The silence that had bound them for years was gone. What remained was a bond stronger than grief, stronger than fear, born again in the simplest word they had signed together. "Come, Papa." Months later, the Carter house no longer felt like a place of shadows. Laughter spilled into every corner, toys scattered across the floor, and small voices filled the silence that once ruled the halls. Alexander had planned a simple gathering in the garden, nothing grand, just a chance to celebrate how far they had come. Liam and Lucas chased each other through the grass, ribbons streaming behind them. Their hands moved with growing confidence, signing words they once could not dare to form. Elena clapped for them, her joy as genuine as the sunlight on her face, while Alexander watched with a quiet pride he had never known before. When the boys tired, they climbed into his lap without hesitation. Alexander kissed their hair, whispering that he had missed them, even while they had been by his side all along. Eleanor sat close, her presence steady, no longer the outsider who had once knocked on the heavy door of this house, but part of its heartbeat. Alexander turned to her, his voice low, saying she had brought his sons back to him, and more than that, she had brought him back to them. The words carried no weight of formality, only truth. Elena's eyes softened, and she laid her hand over his, as if sealing a promise neither of them needed to speak aloud. The four of them ended up under the old oak tree, the boys curled against their father, Elena leaning beside him. The moment was simple, yet it felt whole, as if the years of loss had been transformed into a bond no storm could undo. For the first time, they sat together, not as broken souls, but as a family made new. If this story touched your heart, please remember to like, share, and subscribe to Emotional Echoes, the place where true accounts and moving fiction come together to heal, uplift, and remind us of life's deepest values. Until next time, take care of yourself and keep your heart open. Don't forget to subscribe. Emotional Echoes for more soul-stirring stories. Thanks for listening.